our speakers today don't need much introduction. You all know them well, and we are very fortunate to have them here. To my right, as you know, is Speaker Frank Chopp, and to my left, at the far left, we have the Majority Leader, Pat Sullivan. Well, but you're far left to Larry, right? Yeah. All right. So, and to my left is Larry Springer, who is a deputy majority leader, and we know him as the business outreach guy. So.
Well, thank you very much for being here today. Can you hear me in the back? Great. Well, I was hoping you wouldn't be able to hear me, but that's all right. Also, what is this with this class? Aren't you any good students supposed to sit at the front of the class? I mean, this is like, Lord. Also, I'm disappointed to hear the Senate's not here. I guess they're real busy. At any rate, I didn't say anything. Okay, so we are real pleased to be here. We're very fortunate to be in the state of Washington. It's very heartening to hear the national newsletters and magazines that rate Washington State actually #1 in many categories in the economy. Business Insider, for example, had numerous indications about Washington State. Maybe Larry could highlight some of those as well, but we are very, very proud of our effort because we think that the job creation effort in this state is extremely important. And so that sort of leads us to our basic theme. What I've been urging people to do is to focus in on the basics. The basics are jobs, education, and health care. In terms of jobs, we were very pleased 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, we led the way for the largest investment in public works in state history, and we very much appreciate AWB's support of the package for transportation. It was not easy, and it was, some people said it was courageous that we, as House Democrats, stepped forward first. It took the Senate a couple years later to come around, and in the end, the package was very, very significant and very important to the economy of the state. And having your support meant a huge amount of difference there in terms of getting it across the finish line. So we want to thank you for that. But now, as we go forward, we got to make sure those transportation projects are implemented correctly and as best as we can. There's nothing perfect in the world unless with this new announcement about the universe. Did you hear about that today? Some of the gravity fields? Yeah. So at any rate, a lot of people were excited about it. Larry Haler was just like tingling. So it's something important that Larry Haler really is tingling about. So I got to read about that. I mean, well, he's from the Tri-Cities. He cares about that stuff. So at any rate. Okay, so we want to work with you to make sure the transportation projects get taken forward and move forward to make sure that those tens of thousands of jobs will be created and they're done as best as possible. Second of all, is we put a lot of effort into basic education. Pat Sullivan's been our lead in terms of that. For many years, the House Democrats led the way with House Bills 2261 and 2776 to lay the path forward for investments in basic education. And we appreciate your support in terms of setting some timetables and goals in terms of improving our public schools. So we're really pleased about that. And I just leave it to Pat to add some more to that as well. And then the last one that I want to highlight is the area of health care, which I care deeply about because anybody here want to give up their health care? No, of course not. It's an absurd concept. So basically everybody needs health care, therefore we ought to make sure people get the health care. It's very simple. And in certain parts of the state, they actually make it an economic driver. I've been to so many meetings in Spokane where they have lobbied for, and then we've agreed to pass legislation, including investments, capital buildings, other kinds of tax diversion money and things like that, to help the healthcare part of the economy in Spokane. They see that as a driving force in health in their economy, not just caring for people's health. So that's a good way of looking at things instead of in silos or one-dimensionally. It's really across the board about how these investments in education and healthcare can actually drive an economic growth pattern, whether it's Spokane or other places as well. So with that, I leave it open for Pat and Larry. We really appreciate both of them being here today. We have actually a 30-person leadership team. No, that's somewhat of an exaggeration, but we got 3 people here to represent us. Larry also has been the lead for us in terms of working with the business community on many fronts. I really, really appreciate his efforts. So which one of you want to start first? Well, are you going to do anything with the minimum wage?
I like it just the way it is, thank you.
Okay. Well, we've been hearing from a number of people from the business community that they have some ideas that they'd like to try to get consensus on. We haven't seen a consensus come together on this. So at this point, I don't know, Larry, do you want to add anything?
So, there's a lot of conversations going on about the minimum wage around campus. And everybody you talk to has got a different idea. And unfortunately, we're kind of caught in that situation where the stakeholders that are engaged in that conversation are in different places. So it's difficult for the legislature right now to find the path to maneuver through to come to some sort of proposal unless we get some buy-in from most of the major stakeholders. And that really means the business community, which many of you represent, most of you all represent, and the labor community. And we're still waiting to see where that breakthrough is. And I know we've had conversations with most of the people in this room, but the emphasis really at this point, in my humble opinion, relies on this group and other business groups to sort of come to us with a commitment to wanting to do something. And it's there in part, not entirely. So I think that's where we're headed.
Well, obviously, it is a supplemental year, and we're going to look at it as a supplemental budget. But there are a couple, I think, key areas that we've got to focus on. First and foremost, obviously, we've got to deal with the bills for the fires. That's critical that we deal with. There are some other emergencies that you're well aware of: mental health, homelessness, and that we have to make some progress on K-12. I think that we'd like to get the court out of this whole thing, so that we're not in contempt, so we can actually focus next year on a really comprehensive solution. But I think we have to make some progress this year. And there'll be a few other areas that will come up, but those are the main categories I think that'll be included in our final budget with any significant additional resources.
Just as a general policy, if people collect that many signatures, the legislature ought to have a hearing on it, public hearing. So that's what it is. We asked, look, as a courtesy to the voters who signed the thing, there was, was it 300-some thousand, and then also to examine it and have an open public forum about what the bill entails. We don't anticipate taking any action on it, and we, in fact, are very concerned about that particular initiative because of the hit on the general fund. We went to some people there and said, look, you say it's revenue neutral. We don't think it is. Please reconsider, but they decided to go forward regardless. But we're not passing that bill. We do think, though, it's helpful, since it will be on the ballot this fall, to have an open hearing, consider the pros and cons, listen to the proponents who put it forward, see what their point of view is, and then have a good airing of the different points of view about it. But I don't anticipate any action. Well, we could talk to the governor about the timing of what he's talking about, and then, of course, the initiative's on the ballot in November. The chances of that initiative passing isn't too great, by the way. I think that's pretty obvious, particularly if it's not revenue neutral. People are going to say, wait a minute, what are we doing here? So I think there will be a lot of people who want to deal with the issue of climate change, but then will have second thoughts about this initiative because of the impact on the general fund, which we need the money for schools and health care and other good things like that.
Yeah.
You talk about your intention to do. So the Senate bill is scheduled for a public hearing on the 19th in the Education Committee. We have a group of 5 legislators within our caucus that has been meeting for the last week to go through options, to look at how you'd move forward on a proposal that not only met its current constitutional test, but to help prevent it from going back to the courts and having the issue right back in our lap. So there are a number of issues that we're going to take a look at. The hopes is that we can come together on something. But we just started last week, and we met again today, and we'll continue to meet, and we'll continue to work with you as well.
I think part of the dilemma there is just doing something that actually meets the court test. I mean, there were 2 basic problems, and they were big problems. They weren't small. So we're open to ideas. That's why we've got a number of people working on it. Well, labor is not monolithic. Neither are members. There are people today that said, that they've got an opinion about the various parts of the minimum wage effort. The thing is anything going to gel to do anything about it other than the initiative going forward that they filed, that labor filed? So, and labor has different points of view, but a group of them have gone forward with a proposal with other community partners to put it on the ballot for this fall. So they, anticipate just needing to go forward from that point of view. Well, personally, I think, look, I personally support the minimum wage. I think you all know that. I think it's very important that if people are working full-time, that they're not in poverty. It's a very basic, fundamental belief. But we also need to make sure that it is done in a way that actually can help build the economy, not tear it down. The phasing in, I think, is important. But the public strongly supports raising the minimum wage. And, people just would like to have some paid sick time off. I mean, these are basic things. They're nothing extraordinarily unusual. And we'll see what the voters say. At least from what I can tell, it's most likely going to be resolved at the ballot box later this fall. But so we see great reports about how the economy is doing so well in Washington State. I mean, it's like I saved you the time of not, I was going to read you all these quotes about how great our economy is. So, and yet we have had the largest, or excuse me, say the highest minimum wage tied to the cost of living. Okay, so we've got the highest minimum wage tied to cost of living in the nation, and yet we're number one in the economy. So that's interesting. Look, I grew up in East Bremerton. Anybody been in East Bremerton recently? It's a great place. Please go there, spend your money. They need the jobs. It's really sad because a lot of the businesses there are boarded up, and they moved out of Bremerton into like Silverdale and all that kind of stuff where he went to high school, right?
Better than East Bremerton.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive about East Bremerton. At any rate, so we know that there's problems around the state, and it's not just rural areas, it's also sort of mixed areas like East Bremerton where you have a shipyard there, which doesn't pay property taxes, by the way, because of it being a federal institution and needing trained workers. So it's just a real dilemma. So consequently, we're looking for ways to spread the economic activity around. And so when we're doing 520, which was an important project to do, it goes right through my district, and I told my constituents that, look, it ain't going to sink on my watch. So we said, we're going forward. Well, they didn't particularly like that, but we did it. But luckily, somebody had the idea, and we supported it, of building the pontoons somewhere else. And that's where we did it in the Hoquiam area, I believe. We built the pontoons there. That was, I think Mark knows that about in terms of jobs there. Then if you look at the next big capital investment we want to make, it's in school construction. So we've got folks working, I hope, Mark, you're part of that effort to look at cross-laminated timber as a way of designing buildings that can be done in a more manufactured basis, so we can build more additional classrooms for we already approve more operating dollars for lower class size. That means you need more classrooms, it's very obvious. But how we do that ought to be done in a cost-effective way, maybe modular through using CLT or not. That's where we're relying on people to tell us if that's doable or not. But make sure that the places that manufacture are in more of the rural parts of the state. So that way we can help the entire state by having school buildings and school rooms built and assembled around the state to help the education. But where those things are primarily manufactured, I believe ought to be in an area of the state that needs the jobs. So we're trying to do a proposal on that. We actually do have a proposal, but we could use some technical advice about how to do a pilot project to test the effort out. I mean, the first thing we want to do is not call them portables, for example. They just generally, any PR consultants here? So we don't want to do portables. On the other hand, they do all sorts of modular stuff in other lines of work that can save money and be more efficient, as opposed to just dribbling out the money to school districts to figure out their own design process for their own thing, which can get rather expensive. But we do have a locally based school system with the local school boards, so they got opinions on their own. So we're looking at different ideas where we could provide options, but also try to figure out a way that we can do several goals, carry out several goals, not just one. So one goal is to provide the classrooms, another goal is to create jobs around the state that need it. Why don't you say?
In terms of trying to be cognizant and sensitive to the economic disparity that we all know exists in the state. We also made a fairly significant investment, and it will be an ongoing investment in the WSU Medical Center in Spokane that we hope in the long run will drive primary care, medical care out into rural communities, should help. We're certainly aware of that. We've had a fairly aggressive agricultural agenda in our caucus for as long as I've been here, dating back to Bill Grant. We have certainly tried to pay attention to those issues. The fire stuff that Pat mentioned clearly is a recognition that there are special needs in certain parts of the state. So, we're trying hard to deal with that. In fact, we just had a bill in finance the other day on payment in lieu of taxes, the PILT issue that is really critical to some of the rangelands in Washington. So, we're aware of that, Brad.
Sure, and just to reiterate, what the court required under McCleary wasn't levy reform. It actually said that we just have to end the reliance of school districts' use of local levies for basic ed purposes. And so, we've brought the levy issue into that conversation, and we'll continue to have that. We've been having conversations for the last, several years on the compensation issue in particular. That's the last component really where schools are using local levy dollars for basic ed compensation, and we have to fix that. We've made some progress, but as you said, it's very complicated. The approach that we wanted to take for this year was to actually get a plan in place. And you hear this plan for a plan. Well, I don't understand what that even means. And everybody who says it, I ask, well, what does that mean? I mean, this is a plan that actually focuses on getting to a solution. It will lay the kind of a framework that will require specific tasks to be done in time for the next school year, in the 2017-18 school year, where we have to finish our work. And I think that getting that basic plan in place this year will help us get to that solution next year. So that's kind of the focus this year. On the levy cliff issue, which Charlie is well aware of, school districts by the end of this, by 2018, they will lose the 4% bump that some of them have taken, with their local levies, and then the levy equalization that goes with that, which is about $90.5 million that's spread out to school districts across the state. It's a big amount of money. They'll also lose what's called the ghost money. When we cut Initiative 728 and we cut K-4 class size enhancement, that effectively lowered the base, so districts got hit twice. They got hit once with the reduction, then once with what they could collect locally because that base was decreased. So when that goes away, it'll have a huge impact on districts, and we have to have our comprehensive reform in place before that happens. So the request that was made by districts across the state this year was to extend that levy cliff by 1 year so that when school districts are doing their budgets next May, finalizing their budgets next May, if we don't have our work done, it'll be chaos. I mean, they won't know what kind of funding will become available for them. So extending that by a year provides some stability and certainty for school districts. It won't take the pressure off the legislature. We'll still have to get that plan or that solution done next year. But I think it's important to do this year so that school districts aren't just in. I think really there'll be some chaos there, and districts will look at insolvency really. Well, it's the converse way. Yeah, I mean, right now it's illegal. Districts can't. They're not allowed to use local levy dollars for basic ed purposes, but because of the fact that the state doesn't provide adequate resources, they're left with no other choice, basically. I mean, so once we provide those additional dollars for them to pay their teachers and their school employees the wages that the local economies demand, then there has to be parameters around the use of those local levy dollars so that they're used for enhancement purposes and not for the basic ed purposes. That's all part of that grand solution that has to happen, has to be in place by the end of the next session. Yeah.
Yeah, Pat's done an excellent job leading our caucus on this issue for many, many years, starting with the sponsorship of those two bills I mentioned, 2261 and 2776. And that set out timelines for us to invest in education, which we have kept to each of those years since then. We've invested along the same timetable that we said we would through those bills. Other questions? Well, right now we're just focusing on this year, that it's a short session, just doing what we need to do right now. But people have got to be thoughtful about how we make the math work. So we hope to work together in a bipartisan manner with everybody to do it just essentially like we did on the transportation plan. The original ideas around that were very, very complicated. Everybody here has got an opinion about transportation and also which projects, things like that, but we came together on that and got the job done. So we need to be open-minded and look at what we can do together to meet the needs of our students that are the future of the state.
That's what happens when you spend those dollars on operating budget. I mean, you're forced to make these decisions, which then lead to a problem where you've spent those dollars on both the capital side and the operating side. The price of gas drops, and then you're stuck with a negative number. We're having conversations about how to deal with it. We'll work with the Senate on some kind of resolution. But going back to the question on revenue, I mean, right now we've balanced the budgets over the last several years with one-time transfers from the public assistance account through MOTCA, through a variety of mechanisms, and frankly, those are running out. I mean, our appropriation staff, I know the Senate Ways and Means staff, always have had those little tricks in their back pocket and how you can kind of come together and finally balance the budget. But I think those are pretty much gone, and those one-time opportunities are gone. I think next year the conversations will be very difficult on how we make those budgets balance. And obviously this points to with MOTCA that the easy solution isn't necessarily the best solution long term. So we will deal with it.
Do I think? Yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. Do I think that? Yes, I think that. Well, good. No, I didn't think last year. That could be misconstrued, that quote. That was a joke.
Yeah, I just talked with the chair of the committee this morning, actually, because she's very much interested in taking a sort of a comprehensive, deliberate look at growth management. It's, 30 years later or 20-some years later. And so she's very much interested in doing that, and I think that sort of informed her notion that we don't want to piecemeal this. I understand the problem that you have there. One of the things I think that that Pat was talking about in terms of balancing the budget next year, job growth and economic activity is in fact what we need. That will help that problem, but it is a long-term solution. It is not going to solve our problem in 2017. So we just need to be cognizant that creating a bill that might allow for job growth in a rail corridor in Southwest or Southeast Washington is perhaps a good thing, but it is not going to solve a budget problem in 2017.
Well, there's many aspects of this whole thing. Basically, you're talking about development, and we have passed numerous bills to streamline permitting processes to make sure projects get done quicker. I mean, one of my biggest complaints, since I do a lot of development work in the nonprofit sector, is just the permitting process, how long it takes, how much it drives extra costs. Also, things like energy codes. You ever heard of that? Yeah, I'm sure you did. Yeah, it's just like when one city department says, "Oh, no problem, you can stay under the old code," and then 3 months later they change their mind, costing that project $16 million. I'm rather upset about it. So anyway, the project going forward is a great success, but we had to deal with that. So it's not just that particular project. There's a lot of projects in the realm here that could really be addressed, at least helped in terms of better permitting and quicker streamlined efforts there. At the same time, the Growth Management Act, I thought, by the way, none of us were here then, so just want to point that out. Second of all, I thought there was something about concurrency. Does anybody remember that word? Which is that the local governments were not supposed to have a lot of necessarily extra projects funded if the roads can't support it or the transportation infrastructure. I don't know if anybody's ever remembered that, but part of the problem that we've got in central Puget Sound is that we've got a lot of development, a lot of jobs, low unemployment, and people are stuck in the freeways, as you well know. And so I think that there needs to be looked at a variety of things about that, and we're open to that for sure because of our own direct experience on development, because it's not only good development for the purpose that we have in mind, but also for the general economy. We're getting the hook from our chief of staff here, so I think that's it. Yeah, now the Senate has a few more. Oh, there we go. Somebody did show up. Okay. Well, then we definitely need to leave then. I didn't mean it that way, Karen. Anyway, thank you very much. Really appreciate your partnership.
So we haven't even given her a chance to eat, barely a chance to catch her breath, but Senator Fraser is here. Most of you know that she's from the 22nd District, which is my district and a lot of yours, so that's very special. And she is the Democratic Caucus chair, and she's here to address us from the Senate. So please welcome Senator Fraser.
Well, thank you. Hello, is this on? Yeah, okay, just kind of swallow it, huh? Okay. Well, hi, good afternoon. It's really nice to be here. You know, the only constant, the only stable thing in the process of the legislature is sort of instability. So we Democrats in the Senate are in the minority, as you know, so we don't set the schedule. So the reason I'm here kind of at the last minute, unpredictably, is the Republicans went into caucus and they didn't come out. And then we couldn't find out when they would come out, and if they did come out, when will we start up again? So now I know it's 1:15, and so I'm able to be here at least to kind of show our flag, let you know we're hard at work. So I think we were asked to talk just briefly about some priorities, so I'm happy to do that. We care about the economy, all sectors of the economy, that they're able to flourish and prosper, and different sectors come in, as you know, with kind of different requests, so it's not like everybody's the same. So we try to do our best to respond. You know, the supernova issue of the session is K-12 funding, but it really affects all funding. So we're hoping by the end of the session to get to where we need to be with some agreement all the way around. I don't know what my Democratic colleagues just said, but we are working hard. We have in our Senate Democratic Caucus a great education team. And of course, it's not just K-12, it's higher ed, it's early learning, it's training and retraining. So we really, you know, education and training is the foundation of our economy. It's really the foundation of civilization. We must do well. Now, we are getting, as you know, conflicting messages from the voters. On one hand, they vote for billions more dollars of education spending. Then when the tax limitation measures on the ballot, they vote for all kinds of limitations on taxes. So we're getting mixed messages from the voters, but we're not getting a mixed message from the state Supreme Court. So we are trying to respond to that. Let's see, healthcare, the big, huge driver of the cost increases is prescription drugs, so I hope you'll help us find some solutions to that. We really need to do more for infrastructure to help the economy. We did a huge transportation package, as you know, last year, but the programs that provide funding for local government infrastructure are hollowing out. And I'm sure there are a lot of you here who are concerned about that. I'm certainly concerned about it. But as we've tried to do more with less, these are among the programs that have started hollowing out. And I urge you to think about this and help the legislature deal with it. On taxes, I've come across a couple of interesting statistics. I know nobody wants a tax increase, and it's been drummed into me that business pays slightly bigger percent than residential in this state. But in the last, I'm not sure, a couple decades or so, the total state income that goes to state government in the form of taxes has gone down around 30%. And then in the Olympian this morning, it said that Washington State is 35th in terms of tax burden, 35th lowest. That was in the Olympian this morning. So, so there's a lot for all of us to think about. And but above all, we need a good economy. It underlies everything else, and it all goes together. So we look forward to working with, we work with everybody here, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. So I'm happy to respond to anything or eat my lunch.
Senator, I want to start off by saying thank you for your years of service. We you've announced that you're not going to run next session and run this fall, and you know we've often been on different sides of political issues, but really appreciate your willingness to listen to us whenever we come to speak to you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very nice. And I hope I do more than listen. I hope I respond as much as possible, because I really believe in what all of you are doing. And you represent a huge sector of our economy, which is foundational. So thank you. So thanks for all of what you do. You work as hard as we do. Okay, well, thank you very much.